Hi, I'm Kaylee, and today I'm going to tell you about all the classics and modern classics that I read in 2019. I have 36 classics and modern classics to talk about today, so we are going to jump right in, right after I make sure that you know that Books for MKs is a charity that donates books to missionary kids. Today's MK shout out goes to Rosemary, who is 5 years old and lives in Tanzania. Like most 5-year-olds, she just loves picture books. If you want to donate to Rosemary and children like her, you can do so at GoFundMe.com. And don't forget to subscribe and give this video a big thumbs up. And here we go straight into the classics that I have been reading this past year. I read 2 plays by Oscar Wilde. I read A Woman of No Importance, and I reread The Importance of Being Earnest. One of the main reasons why I love Oscar Wilde's plays is the very silly dialogue. The characters just say such idiotic things, and it always makes me laugh. It's witty and charming and completely ridiculous. I gave Woman of No Importance 4 stars, and as always, every time I reread it, I gave Importance of Being Earnest 5 stars. I read Agnes Grey by Anne Bronte. This is a book about a shy governess. The writing is elegant and really delightful with very vivid characters. Every bit of dialogue holds these waves of emotion. The writing is very subtle and absolutely brilliant. I read The Moorland Cottage by Elizabeth Gaskell. This is a story about Maggie, who endures the selfishness of her mother and her brother, and she finds friendship with her rich neighbors. The plot is sort of predictable, but the writing makes it feel fresh and interesting. The characters are really deep. Even though the plot, you can sort of tell what's going to happen. The writing really engaged my attention, and it is very dramatic. I read Cecilia by Fanny Burney. After growing up in the country, Cecilia, who is a young heiress, has to navigate the London elite society. I completely adored this book from start to finish. The characters are incredibly real and fascinating. The plot is full of dramatic turmoil. The writing is really intelligent, and it weaves this complex tapestry of emotions and moods. I gave this 5 stars. Technically, this next book is not a classic. It is a biography of Jane Austen, but I'm including it with the classics because, you know, Jane Austen. This biography does a really thorough job of seizing on every letter and journal entry and every mention of Jane Austen, and it gives a lot of information about her family and her brothers and her neighbors and her friends. Sometimes I wish that the book had focused more just on Jane Austen herself instead of all these other people around her, but it is a very thorough biography. I read Little Dorrit by Charles Dickens. Amy Dorrit was born in debtor's prison, and Arthur Clenham befriends her, nicknaming her Little Dorrit because she is the youngest in her family, and he tries to restore the Dorrit family fortunes. Like all of Dickens's books, I really love the complexity of all the plots that are intertwined together. The characters are very compelling and emotionally engaging, and of course the writing is excellent. I gave Little Dorrit 4 stars. I read The Way of the Scarlet Pimpernel by Emuska Orczy. Josette is trying to smuggle her family and friends out of Paris during the French Revolution, and she needs the help of the illustrious Scarlet Pimpernel. Like all the Scarlet Pimpernel books, the plot is fantastic with many twists and turns, and I can never guess what is going to happen next. The writing really makes each person very real and true. I really loved how all the complexities of the different plot points all ran together for this very swift and dramatic ending. Then I went on to read The Laughing Cavalier, which is sort of like a prequel to the Scarlet Pimpernel series. It's about Diogenes, who is a carefree swordsman who lives by his wits in 1600s Holland. He is hired to kidnap the lovely Lady Gilda, but of course he falls in love with her instead. There is non-stop action, and every plot twist is a complete surprise. I really loved the agile writing style. It just keeps the reader so engaged through every page. The characters are all larger than life and wonderfully written. I gave both of the Scarlet Pimpernel books 4 stars. I read Love, Friendship, and Other Early Works by Jane Austen. This is a hilarious collection of Jane Austen's early attempts at writing, and it really shows how witty and sharp she could be, even at a young age. It really is a pity that all of these are just short stories that are unfinished. I was just laughing and chuckling through every page because the situations are so completely insane and ridiculous, and it's really hilarious writing. I read The Black Stallion by Walter Farley. Alec is headed home aboard a steamship, and when the ship sinks during a storm, there are only 2 survivors, Alec and a beautiful black stallion. I was completely riveted while reading this book. The writing has such good pacing, and the action really moves the story along. It's excellent writing, and I loved all the characters. I gave this 4 stars. I read Percival Keene by Frederick Marryat. This book has adventure and pirates and duels of honor and shipwrecks and mistaken identity. I loved the action and the fast-paced writing style. The plot is woven together really well, and every new development has a fascinating outcome. The characters are all so interesting and so brave, and I really loved the close relationships and the friendships that they formed. I gave Percival Keene 4 stars. I read Moll Flanders by Daniel Defoe. Although I can appreciate the importance of this novel and the subject material and the writing style, I just hated this book from start to finish. I hated Moll Flanders herself. She is sneaky and conniving and selfish. She is entirely self-centered, and I thought the writing style could have been more emotional. It's just a very factual, pragmatic style that I did not think applied very well to the dramatic plot. The story is much too long, and the book just stagnates for about 100 pages, and nothing really happens in the plot during all that time. I can see why it's a classic, but it has awful storytelling. I ended up giving it 3 stars. I reread a bunch of my favorite Louisa May Alcott books for probably the 12th or 15th time. I reread Jack and Jill. Jack and Jill are in a sledding accident, and they have to support one another through their long recovery from their injuries. It's a very sweet story about friendship in the face of trials and illness. I just love the story and the characters and how sweet and wholesome it is. And then I reread the Little Women trilogy, which is Little Women, Little Men, and Jo's Boys. Even rereading these for the 10th time, I found them absolutely adorable. They're just such innocent and sweet stories. All of these get 5 stars every time I read them. And I reread a collection of short stories from Ella Montgomery entitled Against the Odds, Tales of Achievement. This short story collection has all of the sweet, old-fashioned charm of the Anne of Green Gables books. The stories are all different, but they all share the same themes and the same messages of hope. I finished up my 3rd or 4th reread of the Swallows and Amazon series by reading The Picts and the Martyrs and The Great Northern. I love this series so incredibly much. There's brilliant writing and endearing characters and interesting plot lines. All the daring adventures. It's just everything that a children's book should be. I always give these 5 stars. I've just finished rereading them, and I just want to reread them again. In the same kind of style and subject material as Swallows and Amazons, I read Fell Farm Holiday and Fell Farm for Christmas. I am so delighted with these old-fashioned stories about 5 siblings who are camping out and hiking in the foothills and in the mountains during their holidays from school. The story has its simple charm, and I really loved the sibling dynamics between the Brown children. And the details of their little camping adventures kept me absorbed and interested through every chapter. I read Little Witch by Anne Elizabeth Bennet. Little Minnikin is a witch's child, but she hates all the mean, evil, witchy things that her mother does, and she just wants to go to school and make friends with normal children. This is a sweet and charming story with an old-fashioned fairy tale kind of style to it. I really loved the magical fairy tale elements of this one. I read Hurricane Treasure by Claire Bice. Shad is a boy who lives in a small town on the coast of Maine, and there is a local miner who is searching for pirate treasure. I loved this old-fashioned adventure slash mystery. The writing is good, the storytelling is great. I loved watching the characters figure out the mystery and all of the history behind the pirate treasure that was supposedly left. I gave this one 3 stars. It's really fun. I read Calico Bush by Rachel Field. In 1743, Marguerite is an indentured servant to a colonial family. I was so enchanted with this book. The plot and the history and the characters, they all feel so wonderfully real and honest, like they could have been real people. It's no wonder that this book won a Newbery Honor Award, and of course, I gave it 5 stars. I read The Great Brain Reforms, which is the 5th book in the Great Brain series. I really enjoy this funny story about the mischievous Tom and how he drags his brothers along for the ride every time he gets into trouble. He definitely reminds me of Tom Sawyer, only he's worse. He's even more mischievous. I gave this one 4 stars. I read 18 and on Her Own from the Grandma's Attic series by Arletta Richardson. In this one, Mabel is done with high school and she's ready to teach her own one-room schoolhouse. I just love how spunky and energetic Mabel is. She is always getting into trouble. She doesn't mean to, she tries to be good. I love the charming writing style and this old-fashioned innocence. It reminds me very strongly of the Little House on the Prairie books. I read several books from the Dr. Dolittle series, and I finally finished reading all of Dr. Dolittle. I enjoy these funny stories and all the hilarious antics of the animals. The characters are also different and memorable. And I love how the ridiculous situations that the Doctor finds himself in always lead to some new discovery. The plots are all really imaginative and kept me guessing throughout all the books. Every book is so different. I gave all of these 4 and 5 stars. And finally, I read Jonathan Livingston Seagull. Young Jonathan is a seagull who longs to unravel the secrets of flight. It's full of hidden meanings and a kind of a mishmash of different religious themes. But with the soaring prose, this book really captured my imagination. It is a strange and weird story, and I gave it 3 stars. And those are the classics and modern classics that I read in 2019. Please leave me a comment down below and let me know what was your favorite classic that you read in 2019. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe, and remember, the right book in the right hands at the right time can change the world.